everyone. It's your girl Miracle Sins, and you are watching God, Sex, and Love. Tonight, we're going to be having a serious conversation. So, parents, get ready to take whatever notes you may need to take because this may save your child in some aspect. We're going to get real about sexual abuse with Dr. Lisa Smith. So, stay tuned.
So don't get so bold to ask, cause I won't go there. So free away, yeah. I'm good, but I bet you wish it I would have a one night affair. But I won't go where you
Welcome back to God, Sex, and Love. I am here with the awesome Dr. Lisa Smith. Hello, how are you?
How are you? How are you today? It's a beautiful day. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here. I mean, I know we got a little chit chat in earlier, and I'm like, "Ooh, this is some good information." I can't wait to get into it.
Yes,
I really appreciate you and your time. Look, welcome to GSL. I know it's your first
thank
time
you.
here.
Thank you so much for the I am so happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to have you too. I know you have a very, very important topic to discuss with us today, and I'm excited to get into it. But first, let's get to know you a little bit more. You can tell us where you are and a little bit about what you do.
So I'm in Florida. Yes, we just went through this crazy hurricane. I live in the Fort Lauderdale area. And I am a college professor and a hypnotherapist, as well as counselor and therapist for people who have suffered all types of abuse. That is my specialty. That is my focus. And I also have a criminal justice background. So most of my degrees are in psychology. However, I do have a master's in criminal justice because I also work with young males who are caught in the system, but juveniles. Juveniles are usually the area that I specialize in. But I've been teaching for the past 20 years. And I absolutely enjoy my job because we are looking at sexual assault in such a way that we're trying to change the paradigm where children are now becoming the superheroes to prevent this. Because as I say all the time, listen, you don't have to talk about sex with your child, but somebody will. And
Mm,
that someone who does may not always be someone you would have selected to have that conversation. And the
mm,
number of children that are approached by sex offenders
mhm,
is staggering. We have a lot of undetected sex offenders walking around simply because most families know there's a sex offender that they know.
mhm,
But the issue is such that parents don't know how to educate their child about what happens when my child is approached. It's always about a win. It's not my child won't be approached.
mhm,
It's when, right? Because I'm just going to flat out give you the statistics.
mm,
1 in 4 girls, and that number is really lower because I come from a family of 4 girls. All
mhm,
4 of us have been sexually assaulted. So in the African American community,
mhm,
that number is different, right?
mhm,
1 in 6 boys, right? Now, this number is before the age of 18. So you got to understand why my paradigm shift has to happen now,
mhm,
because you can pick the 4 girls in your family right now that you love and adore. Which one of them would you select for sexual victimization, right?
Woo.
So what I do is I help parents educate their children and teens with tips and resources
Mhm,
to fight or to deter um, sex offending, right? And the problem is that oftentimes the sex offender is a cousin, is a father, is an uncle, is a sister, is a babysitter, right? They're
mhm,
in the house
mhm,
with us.
mhm,
COVID showed us that. Every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services confirms sexual assault. So in the next 9 minutes, they will confirm sexual assault nationwide. right? They confirm another victim. And we won't even get into the foster care system and teen runaways. We won't even get into that. That's another, that's another topic for another day. So that's who I am. That's what I do. And I stress that, this is happening under our noses
Mm-hmm.
because I was in the house when my sister was sexually assaulted,
Mm.
right? And people think, okay, because my daughter is older, this can't happen to her. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys before the age of 18. So we have a lot of people walking around with sexual trauma. That was a
Ooh,
mouthful, right?
look, not the least look at here. Oh Lord, you and I already about to make me faint and take me out of here today. Um, well, one, I appreciate you and I commend you for what you're doing and the work you're doing because yes, I do believe it's very important. I have shared my testimony as well. I'm glad to say that my experience wasn't as traumatic as it could have been, but at the same time, I could totally see how young children are going through things and then it just carries the rest of their life, things they go through in those younger years. And so yeah, I'm glad that people are speaking out about it because that's the thing that people just brush things under the rug. Me too. I brushed the things under the rug for like a long time before I even verbalized it or said anything. And hey, now here we are, and I'm just talking about it all the time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a very important conversation to have because of everything you just said. I mean, yeah, it is under our noses in our homes. And I'm a mother now, so I look at my 3-year-old and I really don't want him to experience anything remotely near that. I don't want him to be exposed to any of this stuff before the time that he should
Absolutely.
be. But as a parent, yeah, I have to take you. That first quote you said about it when you first start talking about it, that someone's going to teach him, and it might be somebody you wouldn't choose. Like that is real, and that's what's been on my heart and mind, since becoming a mom. That I would rather expose my child and teach my child what I want him to know about whatever versus having someone else introduce it to him and whatnot. So yeah, I have been struggling about if I'm even going to put my son in school or not. I know
Mhm.
he's turning 4 actually on Saturday, and
Oh,
he just happens
wow.
to be one of the later kids. So
Hey.
he technically could have been in school if he was a little bit, if he was born a little bit earlier. But because I know kids go to start doing pre-K and stuff around that at 4. But I'm like, I'm kind of glad. I'm kind of glad to be honest, because I still debating. I'm like, it might be a homeschool situation or it's like a small like I don't know, like I'm really leaning that way because of everything that's happening these days, and what
Absolutely.
I'm observing. Because I feel like school is just so different than it was when I was coming up, and that's a whole nother conversation again.
And you
But
want to keep them safe, right? That's
yes,
the goal. You want to keep them safe. You
yes,
want to put them in these settings.
mm-hmm.
Um, but usually the settings that we select are the settings where they come to be harmed.
That's true too. That's true too, because like you say, when things are happening in the home or with family members or friends of the family or whatever the case is, then it's like I know we can't shelter them, right? So we have to get that. I feel like the leg up and probably, like you say, I guess try to. I don't know. I mean, obviously, you could tell us better what we can do.
Oh, absolutely. I have loads of solutions that can aid that. I mean, I want to make this disclaimer um, that the tips are about prevention, about being proactive so that we're not reactive. So one of the things that you can do, homeschooling is perfect, right? But
Mhm.
even if you homeschool your child can go to a friend's house, right? Your child will go and to an aunt's house. Your child will have a sleepover or go to a camp, right? Activity. They might be in Girl Scouts, they might be in 4-H, they might be in ballet and African dance and I mean soccer and gymnastics. We
Okay.
have already seen what happened with the gymnasts. The U.S. Olympians, right? We've already seen that, right? They could be in all kinds of areas which we've sanctioned, right? We've said, I'm going to drop you here and I'm going to pick you up. And while I'm gone, or should I say school? So school, not putting them in school is not going to save them. What I mean by proactive is that parents have to tell their children, this is a potential scenario. What would you do? Right? Because your 4 and 5-year-old needs to know, I have to trust my mom and dad enough that I will tell them that this is what this person said and this is what this person did. And that happens to that has to happen every single time that child leaves your house or leaves your presence and returns, right? Because unfortunately, with infertility issues, I don't have any children, but I am a great auntie. And I have been raising my nieces and nephews to be proactive. And their parents have sanctioned that I can explain to them what is going to happen when they approached. So that's the first thing, right? Because if a child is not introduced to these scenarios, they're not going to know how to respond. You're asking a 5-year-old to use certain words that deter. So what would that word be? If you talk about sex to me, I'm going to tell my mom about this conversation. If you touch me there, I'm going to tell my dad about this conversation as soon as I see him. Those, I mean, they interview sex offenders and sexual predators because they're not the same thing. They interview sex offenders all the time. What does a sex offender look for? They first groom the parents and then they groom the child. If your child is not, is ignored, if you work a lot and your child is home alone by themselves, because age 14, you're in certain states, I happen to live in Florida, but at age 14, you can be in the house by yourself. And you can sometimes take care of your younger siblings, right? So if that 14-year-old is on their computer, what happens when their friend comes over and decides they're going to pay more attention to your younger child who's like 8? What do you do? Because they're not going to tell you, they don't want to tell you the stat of juvenile sex offenders, but I will. 53%. 53% of sexual assaults and victimization are coming from other kids. So let me give you an example. I've always worked with at-risk youth. It is, kids are so honest, right? But always adolescents because they're truthful and they're honest. And I had a 12-year-old, I won't tell you his name. He had the most adorable face, but his father suffered from alcoholism, was a functioning alcoholic, and often took him to places where he shouldn't be, and he was exposed to all types of things. So he was sexually assaulted 4, 5. You can run the list because his father is not paying attention, right? And he's sexually assaulted not just by women, but men, right? And so he targets 7-year-olds because that's what he was taught and that's what he does. 7-year-old boys, not girls. He targets 7-year-old boys. And he had no problem telling me this because I had established trust, right? But he wasn't in the program in my after school program because he was sexually assaulting little boys. He was in the program because he got expelled from school, and my program was an alternative program. Instead of sitting at home, you came to my program. And during our counseling conversations, he explained, a lot of mothers don't want him around because he'll tell them. And he tells the children. It's not as if parents don't know that this child or this person is suspect. But the problem is that a sex offender needs access, right?
Mhm.
Access to your child for a period of time. And they're patient. They will wait, right? So maybe saying, I'm going to tell my sister. No, it has to be, I'm going to tell my parent and we're going to come back to your house. Your child needs to know the words to say, because when we talk about grooming, the neglect, it doesn't have to necessarily be neglect. And that's kind of a negative word when you say neglect. But let's say your child goes to school, walks to school, or is walked to school by a sibling, comes home, goes to classes, engages in sports activities, comes home with that sibling, starts their homework. Okay, because let's be clear, parents can't be at home. They're not at home, they work. They sometimes work long hours. So they start their homework, they may get a snack, and then mom and dad is home. Within that period of time, siblings, as much as they want to watch and take care, they're not watching, especially with social media now, especially with gaming. They're not watching. They're not as cognizant of what the dangers are unless something happened to them, right? Unless something happened to them, right? But there are those who adopt the exact same practice. They adopt the sexual offending and become juvenile sex offenders. Now, juvenile sex offenders are not said to continue that poor behavior, but there's no intervention. And like I say all the time, who's having these conversations with your kids when you're not there? What are they being exposed to? The first time I saw porn, I saw it with other kids on my block who brought it to my house. It wasn't that I was reading dirty magazines. It was that a boy who was friends with my older brother brought the the magazine into our home. It's not like I went looking for it, right? So those are some of the things, that's the first part, right? Because the person who may abuse your child may bring wine to Christmas, is invited into the home. Please come in, right? And you know how parents say, oh, this is such and such, give them a hug, right? That's a first body violation, right? A body boundary violation. Did you ask the child if that child wanted to be picked up by this individual? Did you ask the child if, no. And sometimes these children, I know cases of 18-month-old babies that have been sexually assaulted, right? So they can't verbalize it, right? So I always take cues from kids. If that child does not want to come near you when you come in the door, I don't push it, I don't promote it, I don't ask them. The most I might say is say hi, but I don't promote that, because children, man, they are smarter than adults in some things. They can sense that this person is not such a good person. And no, I don't want to come into their personal space, and I don't want them in mine. I mean, let me ask you, have you ever picked up a child and they immediately were calmed? And then somebody else came in and picked up that child, and that child went ballistic, right? Even they know, I want this person to pick me up and not this person. I want this person to come into my space and not this person. So, you can start to have agency and give children agency over their body, right? Body boundaries are so vitally important. And that conversation, of course, is happening now at 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they need to know, because my sister was instrumental in this. If someone touches you on your butt, I want to know. If someone touches you in your private area, I want to know, or whatever name they've given, I want to know. I want to know that as soon as it happens. And if I'm not around, I want you to make sure your babysitter or whoever calls me. And if they don't, I will be back, right? So proactive is what I say. And
Mhm.
understand that a sex offender grooms you. Sex offenders like to be around children. And most importantly, they often have access because they're willing to take your child from the confines of their home someplace else, right? I have no problem watching them while you go and do such and such. Sure, they can stay at my house. Now, this is not to say that loving individuals don't make the same statements.
Mhm.
But if they see that a mom is overwhelmed, like I said, they're going to groom the parent first. The parents, if they're in a single parent home, the parent, they're going to groom there first. They're going to watch where that parent is overwhelmed, right? And they're going to look for entrances into ways in which they can be with your child. And so that means taking them out of the house, given there are many instances in which a sex offender offers rides. I can pick them up from school and get them back home. I can pick them up. I'm taking my child, right? Sex offenders are in families. You understand? They're not only child, they're not the only child. They're in families, right? And they're looking for you to start slipping. They're looking for you to ignore the fact that they are getting closer and closer and closer. Now, you have any questions for me?
No, ma'am. I am just engulfing all of the wisdom and knowledge as a parent, yes, but yeah, I think what the people need to hear is what you have to say. I don't think yeah,
So the other piece that we ignore is gift giving, right? When my cousin was sexually assaulted, it was candy. It was the price of candy. And
mhm,
here's the crazy thing. They promise candy, but they don't often give the candy after the deed is done, right? So let's take you through her scenario. Okay. It was her cousin. She visited that house, grew up in that house, but he was 14, 15 years old, and he had been sexually assaulted. So the model is framed by past sexual assault behavior. And here's what people don't understand. They don't like to talk about sexuality and children. But in our conversation, masturbation is a big deal for young kids, right? However, if someone else touches you and you feel pleasure, oftentimes children are not going to say no, right? Because it felt good,
mhm,
right? And so usually there's an escalation to the approach. If I touch, like I said, most pedophiles tell you, if I go a little bit too far, if I put my hand in a space where she should be saying no, or he should be saying no, and that child does not protest, then I can go a little bit further the next time I touch, right? And so it starts very simple as how far will this child let me go, right?
mhm,
So personal space is a big deal. You don't let strangers into your personal space. Well, children have personal space too. So we need to educate them on body boundaries and the length of our personal space. Our personal space should be arm's length, completely 360 degrees around us. And the only person we invite into that space are trusted people. And even if that means you cannot trust your parent, and the other parent needs to know why.
mhm,
So when we get into my theory of dis, colloquial from African Americans, don't diss me, it's called disrespect. But my take on that is when sexual assault happens, this theory comes into play. Denial, the D, inaction, the I, and information suppression, the IS, right? So we constantly diss our kids. Our kids are information. right? We deny that it happened. No, that couldn't have happened. She would have never done that. Then we don't act, right? We don't act. And then we suppress the information so other little kids don't have the information. Other parents don't have the information, so we can keep the community safe. It takes a tribe to tell the secret. Who's the biggest secret keeper? The parent does not want something bad to happen to their brother, right? The parent does not want something bad to happen to the teacher. The parent does not want something bad to happen to the pastor. The parent does not want something bad to happen to their daughter, right? Even the victims themselves go through this. Some children disassociate and they deny that their body was violated because they went into shock. They detach from the emotion, right? It's not easy to know what to do with victimization, right? So they don't always tell in action. And they don't always tell who and what happened. Information suppression. So you can see it with victims. You can see it in the community of people, legions of people who have heard the story that this person wasn't good and did nothing and continue to send their kids there, right? Disassociation is what happens when a child is victimized, whether they're molested or violated, intimately violated, penetrated is what I'm talking about. And we need to be, on a grassroots level, we need to be more conscious of what that means in our communities. We need to stop hiding the undetected sex offender.
Mhm.
You're shaking your head. You must know someone who people knew this is what they were doing, but no one did anything about it. And people hid the information from other people who needed to know. Cops do that. Law enforcement does this all the time. That's not important enough for prosecution. Let me give you the stat on that. Sexual assault and rape. The stat is very clear. 5 out of 1,000 will be prosecuted. What about the other 995? Why aren't they prosecuted? You want to know why people don't tell? Because we don't do anything about it. We send them right back into the den where that person is every single day. We find out a teacher did something. When do they become responsive? When there's a legion of outcry from other parents this happened to, that's usually when, I mean, even with Bill Cosby and his 60, like that can't be the number. The 60 though. What happened at the 1? Right? Harvey Weinstein. These are well-known cases. They've been Bill Cosby in a deposition told you that he used Quaaludes. You don't need to use Quaaludes. How many people, adults, your audience, were introduced to substances by other kids? Right? So when we talk about juvenile sex offenders, the substances are usually at the bar in the house or in the there it's accessible and it's not illegal. Alcohol is not illegal. I mean, children shouldn't be drinking it, but we don't lock it up like a gun. It's usually, on a top shelf somewhere away from children. So, I mean, it's not hard for victimization to happen. It's not hard. R. Kelly. Everybody knew about R. Kelly 20 years ago when he married Aaliyah, 14, right? They knew. They knew. Information suppression is what happens in communities because the pastor and the fireman or the police officer is just too prominent for us to bring a case against them. right? It's too prominent. A doctor is just too prominent. Girls have always said, I hate going to that pediatrician. I don't like what he does when you're not in the room. But most of the time, they don't have that conversation until years after they've been subjected to molestation. Is a big deal. It is the entry point to penetration. Let me say that again. Molestation is a big deal. It is the entry point to penetration. So just because it happened 3 times, well, escalation is next. You want your child to be penetrated, right? Because that's another traumatic issue that people don't want to talk about. And the way it affects your sexual identity and idea of what sex is so vitally important, because we fight as parents to keep them safe. And my niece, at 4 years old, another little boy in her class who's also 4 is asking her to show him her privates. And it doesn't stop there. He says, I'm going to beat you up. Well, of course, does not want physical violence, right? However, she is being introduced to this and she's not telling anybody. She didn't tell her parents till she was 12 years old. We just heard that story maybe 3 months ago. So how do you keep your kids safe if sex is not a conversation you have with them? I mean, how have you done it?
Well, thus far, I have taught my son the, actual words, for his genitalia and everything like that. So even though I know it's like weird, he'll go around and be like penis, but I'm like, okay, now that you know that, now don't just be talking about it all the time, or don't just be, X, Y, and Z, and I have kind of acted out scenarios like if someone tried to touch this, you say no, trying to get that into his heart and mind. Again, he's 3, about to be 4, so. Yeah, I mean that's how so far how far the conversation has gone. I mean, I haven't gone into any other things yet, but that's so far about like, because the body parts, because like he's like, well, what's this, what's that, so I'm trying to just teach him like, okay, this is what it is. I mean, well, I call it like, I say hind parts instead of booty or anything, even though that
Right.
shocked me one day, because there was one day, I want to say he was 2 or between 1 or 2, and I was getting something, like I bent over and got something. He's like, booty. I'm like, well, first of all, how'd you even know that word? And then second of all, I'm like, we say hind parts or whatever. Like, I've only said hind parts to him. So somebody taught him booty apparently. But I was like, okay. So, and I noticed he has been like, well, what's this? What's that? And so I'm trying to navigate that. But that's as far as I've gone so far. My son in particular. But yeah, I mean, I just know how like important everything that you're saying is, and it is this thing that is like, so like you say, everybody knows all of the things you said, but at the same time, it's been suppressed. Like people aren't talking about it and whatnot. And again, these conversations are very important for all the reasons you already said. I mean, I really don't have to even go and say it all again, because yeah, and I'm very concerned again as a mom to hear all of this again, even with the things I know, because again, a lot of adults again are talking about it now, and talking
Oh,
about
they're
what
talking
happened.
about their victimization, right?
Yeah, and dealing with the results of that, in our older age and whatnot, and so and it's sad, because I'm like, of how uncommon, I mean, of how common it is. It's sad. One thing is, for me, I'm like, why don't people just leave kids alone? Like, in my mind, kids can't consent. You know what I mean? They're not gonna say, yes, this is what I want. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think any, and if a child is saying that, it's because they haven't already been exposed. Like, I don't think any kid comes out and be like, I
No.
want whatever this person is offering.
And I'm glad
That's
you
I
said
don't know.
that, because that's one of the first signs that your child has some form of victimization, their knowledge and their reaction. And so I had a mother contact me on my Instagram account, and she was like, I need your help. My child is asking me for anal. She's 4. She was 4. She's 4.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And
What do you mean? Hold on, wait. How do you
yeah,
mean asking for what?
no, yes. Yes. Touch me, use your finger, because digital penetration, people don't understand. That's with the fingers, right?
Mhm,
Into certain offices, right? And
mhm,
nobody wants to have these discussions because they don't want to know that their child has been exposed in this way.
mhm,
And so this 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 woman was at an end because she couldn't get the doctors to pay attention. She couldn't get um, the police to pay attention. The judge was throwing out all the people that could validate that this is actually what this child is saying. And what happened as a result was um, her daughter began to distrust her mother, scream and yell, I don't want to be here. But it was a custody situation in which the father had custody on the weekends, and she would go to to her father's house, and these things would happen. I mean, he was exposing her to him having sex with his new wife, and the wife did not object, or she didn't make it clear to the child. Now, mind you, the child's still 4. And when she came to me, it was over a holiday break, and she was asking, what should I do? And she was like, I don't know what state she's going to come back in. Her child was always visibly upset. You can always see, she said, you can always see that she's been crying. And I said, if she comes back to you and you can see that because usually they're non-responsive, they don't talk anymore, they don't want you to touch them, they act out, they scream, they have temper tantrums, they have pain in the genital region, in the anus. And so I asked her to gain her daughter's trust to check her private parts. But of course, it took her 2 hours. Her daughter did not trust her anymore. It took her 2 hours for her daughter to give her access. And it was completely red in the anal area. And yes. And so what's the next thing? The hospital. The hospital is required. They're mandatory reporters, right? They're required to check your child, and they're required to call social services. So a lot of people will avoid this step. They'll think, oh, maybe they were riding their bicycle. No, fissures do not happen from riding bicycles. Okay. You can absolutely rip the hymen on a bicycle seat. But children, in this instance, if nothing was done when the first time the child came to you, why would they trust you anymore? Because their thought is that I'm telling my parent because I want my parent to do something, and I want this to stop, right? But if it's the other parent, then it's about the paper trail. And I always tell people, if you go to the doctor, or if you go to law enforcement, there's other places you can take them if they refuse to take a report about it. There's no other places you can take them. Another hospital, another police station. And if they won't, I mean, everybody has some person in authority over them. The hierarchy is easy to see. And if you can't get any cooperation from your local law enforcement agency, there's the prosecutor's office. I mean, flood them with calls, because here's the thing. Your child is going to continue to be hurt because of your inaction, right? That's the key. Because oftentimes this is just not a one-off event. That's when it's with strangers. Stranger danger is not what we should be teaching. Stranger danger. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But we should be teaching family danger, acquaintance danger, teacher danger, pastor danger, deacon danger. We should be teaching these types of conversations,
Yeah.
right? And then if you don't want to have the conversation, I have two children's books. One is Chad Keeps a Secret. Aaliyah Can't Tell Her Secret. And yes, I named her Aaliyah because at the time when I was writing this book, R. Kelly was on trial and people were like, oh, he's going to get off. I mean, this conversation that he was going to get off, even though they had documentaries and extensive. So I named her Aaliyah and I named her cousin Robert in the book. And she's older, 5 to 9 years old, but you can read this book to your children early because it's not hardcore. You know, I always look at, okay, so why would my book get banned? One, because it's talking about sexual violence. But with Chad, his friends help him solve the problem, not his parent, because they're the ones who recognize something's wrong. They're the ones who are like, oh, he doesn't come outside anymore. Oh, he doesn't. If I go to hug him, because it was a brother and sister, Aka and Becca, who went and helped him and identified the signs. And so the young protagonist in the book, he goes to his sister because Chad usually listens to her. And he invited her over to play basketball with him because she plays basketball with them sometimes. And she went to his room and started asking him questions. And so the kids are the superheroes. The kids are the ones who take the information to the parents. And most of the time, that's what happens in real life. The child will be so distressed because in their toolbox, they don't know what to do. Don't blame them. They were there because they can't tell an adult no, because we tell our children to be respectful of adults. We almost put them in harm's way, right? We push them into the lion's den because if he or she wants to do that, why would you say no? No, there's lots of reasons to say no. We have to empower our kids because they're the ones on the front line. Right? And a lot of times, why would they? In the book, Aaliyah Can't Tell Her Secret, she's helping her mom give her younger sister a party. There's a lot of preparation. What will I wear? And she has a best friend who lives next door. And so the day of the party, they can't find Aaliyah. They don't know where she is. They want to tell her how magnificent the party is, but they can't find her. Now, mind you, her sister knows nothing about what's happening. And she is sexually assaulted and penetrated by her cousin who happened to be visiting and was staying in the house. How many times has a parent allowed a family member who they don't often see to sleep in the child's room with the child? Right? So now they have 8 hours of access to your child when nobody's up. Everybody's asleep. Right? So that kind of victimization happens all the time. Right? At other people's homes. Right? So yeah, sleepovers, they're great. You're gonna be up all night. You staying up all night? No, your child does not need to sleep in the room with a family member that he doesn't often visit and is only there for 2 nights. No. Sure, let him sleep in the child's bed, but the child should sleep somewhere with you. Right? And then there's also, surrogate. I've talked a lot about children, but what about teens? So mom is sick or mom's out of town And dad says, especially in incest cases, the daughter is looked at as a surrogate. And so she takes on the role when her mom is sick to take care of the siblings, right? And people don't like to talk about incest, right? There's a great documentary called Family Affair, in which all three girls were victimized by their father. It's old, it's older. I show it in my classes, but all three girls were victimized, not only sexually assaulted, but physically assaulted, right? And their brother didn't know about it, and their mother didn't know about it. He only did it, and he would pick and choose which one, right? So their first sexual experiences were with their father, right? And sometimes he was sweet and nice, and sometimes they got beat before he sexually assaulted them. But in incest cases, whether it's a sibling and sibling or parent and child, it's important to recognize access, long periods of time, circumstances surrounding why this child has this much opportunity to be with this person by themselves, and babysitting, right? That babysitter is supposed to care for that child. And one of the I have several books out, but those are my children's books, and I also intend to write young adult books, because that's the other vulnerable population. It's girls and young children. That's the most widely sexual victimized group on earth, right? And so where is their agency? Who's speaking for them and who's teaching them? See, the more scenarios you give them, the more you arm them with the words, with the action. What do you do? If someone is trying to kiss you, how do you get out of the house? Right? If it is your boyfriend, right? Because my little cousins and nieces and nephews, they have little boyfriends and girlfriends, right? What if they're doing something that you don't want to do? How do you stop that? Right? For many, sexual victimization was their first sexual experience, especially for girls losing their virginity. They were victimized by a boyfriend, a brother, a friend, an acquaintance. That has to be, I don't really need to come on your program. The statistics have been there for decades. The question is, what do we do? We as the adults, what do we do? Right? What are the tools that we can give our kids? I talk to, I'm in a book club, I have students. I'm like, listen, it starts from birth. It starts from birth. Body boundaries start from birth. You decide who comes in contact with that child. And background checks, the wonderful thing about law enforcement or criminal justice reform is that we now have databases, extensive databases that tells you this person is a problem in the community. However, most people don't consult those databases when they're looking for part-time help, the landscaper who comes and mows your lawn, right? Most people don't consult those databases when they're looking for a karate coach. Most people don't consult those databases when they're looking for the person that's going to teach your child soccer. They don't, right? And usually if you, and nobody's going to look at the databases for the juveniles, right? Because very few exist for juveniles. And most of the time, I guarantee you, if a younger cousin, let's just say hypothetically, if a younger cousin assaults his, let's say he's 10 years old, Or like my sweet little kid who was 12 years old, had the cutest face, but was sexually victimizing other 7-year-old boys, right? What's the parent going to say? I don't want to get him in trouble. I don't want to ruin his life. Maybe this is just one that is happening. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to keep my kids away from them. This doesn't help other kids. The question, this is what is most important. You want one victim or you want 10, right? Right? We'll take the L on one victim, but if you don't stop it, if you don't cut off the head of the snake, guess what? You're going to have more and more and more and more victims. R. Kelly didn't stop at Aaliyah. Harvey Weinstein didn't stop at Gwyneth Paltrow. Every time they use candy, every time they have to spend $50 on a game, every time they have to buy some shoes or some, it's a small price to pay for your child's agency, your child's sexual identity. They'll pay that money. Sometimes it's not even a lot of money. They might give a kid $20 to penetrate them. But even then, they might give a child now later candies and sour, oh, I forgot the name. The name escapes me. Sour Patch candies. They're not really using lots of tools. They're just using the fact that you're not going to talk to your kids about it, and they will. And then enticing. I have another example. I have loads of examples. I'm sorry. My niece's 7-year-old friend is on TikTok and Instagram. On that TikTok page, and she's so tiny, she tells everybody she's 16. Now you can look at the picture and you know the girl is not 16. Does her mother know? No. Does her brother know? No. Right? No. And he's 16. But she dresses provocatively. And let's be clear about social media. The account that they show mom and dad is not the account they show the rest of the world. So let's just get that clear. Just because you allow your child to be on social media does not mean that they don't have another account or 2 or 3 accounts, as this 7-year-old showed me. And so as soon as I went up there, I was like, take me to her house, because I'm a mandatory reporter either way. I'll take the L. I don't mind. What are they going to do to me? Listen, your child has these accounts. And the only reason why I got involved is because I was in Disneyland. We were waiting to get on the bus to take us back to our car. And here, this little girl is, all right, people, hold on to your hats, is using my niece's handle or whatever it is, I don't know what it's called, to put her into different groups that my niece thinks is inappropriate. So her little friend has her social media at whatever, I don't know what it is. And she's using that to place her in a group of older kids. And so my little niece is complaining to me, and I get on the phone immediately to this girl and say, these are inappropriate. You shouldn't be on these sites, and do not put my niece's anything into this site or onto this group chat or ever again. Right? That was Disneyland. I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting that. But as I said before, you also have to monitor the fact that there's access everywhere. Who is your child talking to online? In my adult book, it's called The Blaming and Shaming of Defenseless Victims in America's Rape Culture. And that's for parents. That's also for my students, right? What is the first thing that we do? We say it didn't happen. It couldn't have happened. They wouldn't do that. He or she would have not allowed that to happen. It's not true. It's not right. And your denial does not change the fact that victimization happens just because you wish to deny it. It doesn't change the fact that it does. Just because you decide to do nothing, inaction. Let's get back to this. You dissing your kid. Inaction does not mean it's not going to happen. And as much as you don't want anybody to know, because it's embarrassing, right? It's a humiliation. Parents are supposed to protect their child, right? To go out and say, my child, this happened. Information suppression. You ain't doing nobody a favor by suppressing the information that your child just brought to you. You're only making other kids more vulnerable to victimization. And that's my 2 cents. So like I said, I'm here to teach you what I know. I have no problem teaching you what I know, but it's not me. It's up to you to have these hard conversations. Like I said, I have Chad Keeps a Secret. You can get this on Amazon. I have Aaliyah Can't Tell a Secret. If you want, you have to have these conversations with these kids. Aaliyah Can't Tell a Secret. And if your parents looking for information, facts, there's this book, The Blaming and Shaming of Defenseless Victims in America's Rape Culture. Okay. All of these books are available on Amazon. And if you're fortunate enough to take a class with me, I talk about it because, you know, some of my students aren't parents yet. Some of them were victimized. And like I said, I teach parents how to educate their children and teens, right? With tips and resources to deter sexual offense, right? But I also have spent the last 20, 21 years helping victims overcome that trauma of abuse and sexual assault. So there's 2 sides of that coin. I'm trying to cut the snake's head off by educating parents that you've got to have these conversations as early and as frequent as possible. You don't know the tools, you make them superheroes. If they find out that another friend is being hurt, they need to come to you. If they find out something happened to their cousin, one last example, and she was older. This is a 16-year-old girl. Her mom and her family, they're homeless, so they're staying at an aunt's house. The stepfather, the step uncle, he comes in every night. She sleep on the couch. Before he gets his beer, he tugs on her breast. He touches her backside, and then he gets his beer, and then he goes off to the bedroom. That happens every night. And she plays as if she is asleep because she doesn't want to confront him. Now, when I confront her mother, because I'm a mandatory reporter and that's what I do, right? And she happens to be in the program that I'm in, that I'm directing. And her mom cussed me out. She said, "You're going to make us lose our housing. We have no place to go." I can't tell you how many times I've been cussed out. I've had a father invite me to fight. And I just won't be bullied. I told him, I get off at 5. This is where you can find me. I promise you, you'll find me. I'm not running, but I won't be alone. Right? And so, you know, you can call me any name in the book, but my students and the children in my programs will never say I ignored them when they told me that they were being abused or harmed in any way. I always followed up. I always did followed every protocol, and I put parents on notice that I don't need to know you. I don't have to have any stake in the game. My only job is to keep the kids safe, period, point blank, full stop. We done. And you're not doing it. And they've told other people, but no one's ever going to accuse me of not doing anything.
Well, Dr. Lisa, God bless you.
Thank you so much again.
um, Thank you for what you're doing.
I appreciate your kind words. I mean, but the thing in the end, right? It's the children who are harmed. Like I said, the foster care system, they know those kids are being harmed. It doesn't matter, right? And so I want kids to matter to people. And I want, if the parents aren't going to do anything, and if the teachers aren't going to do anything, I want them to know, the children to know what to do, right? I want them to know what to do when people stop listening to them and people say, deny what's happening, and they don't do anything.
Well, I feel like we have to have you back because I do have a question, but
You know where to find me. Right to consent. Consent is so important. You have the right to consent. That's right. Number 2, consent.com. You can find all my books there. It links to Amazon, to the Amazon pages, my publisher's page as well, for the book for parents. But it also takes you through the history of why we ignore sexual assault, right? Why can the Catholic Church allow it for decades? Why? I mean, the horrible thing is the Boy Scouts had pedophile files. This is what it was called since the early 1900s, when the troops were first established, right? So we know this is happening in our community. We need to be more active. And so that's why I am going to use the grassroots, because Me Too started as grassroots, Tarana Burke, and then it ballooned into this big social justice movement. But what about our kids? Anytime you're looking to cover a topic, especially, like I said, sexual assault, victimization as well. I'd love to, even if you have a panel, I have no problem sharing what I know. Thanks again.
No problem. Thank you. I don't know if this is about to be a teaser, but I'm gonna go ahead and say this so then we do this. I
Okay.
would love for you to come on back and tell me what you think about this whole MAPS movement
Mm.
and everything like that. So y'all stay tuned because Dr. Lisa got to come on back. I done put it out there. She gonna come talk about MAPS, what she think about it and everything.
Sure.
And like I said, God bless you. Thank you so much for coming tonight, sharing, and till next time.
Till next time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Miracle Sims, let's go. No, I'm good, but I bet you wishing I would have a one night affair. But I won't go where you wish I could. 'Cause right now you're looking so good. That's right. But is it worth the chance? Still even more than a day. No, you see what I'm about.
Thank you so much for watching God, Sex, and Love. And thank you to Dr. Lisa Smith for joining us tonight. I hope that you all enjoyed the conversation. It was very, very informative for me as a parent, and I hope that it was for you. By all means, check out her website, look into her children's books, things like that. Let's do whatever we can to be diligent about our children in this season. I'm looking forward to having her back again. And yes, I hope that you guys have a great night. Like, subscribe, share. Definitely share, friends, because this message needs to get out there.
I'm good, but I bet you wishing I